Welcome everybody to the first waivers report for February. Didn't do one for January because there was a lot going on. And so January, notoriously, right, is kind of like, it's a month where we are beginning a new energy. I know there's a lot of debate on when the new year starts, but there is a new energy that always comes in that time. But January also notoriously is a transition period from the previous year into the new year. So it really usually takes until the Chinese New Year at the end of January to really get solidified and rolling into the New Year's energy. So throughout January, there was a lot of wrapping up of the previous cycle. And we did just have the Chinese New Year on January 29th. And that also coincided with the new moon in Aquarius. And of course, now we officially have Pluto in Aquarius. So this was kind of a really huge starting point where you could really feel the new energy, especially of this year, coming through that new moon, and of course through the celebrating the Chinese New Year. So this kicks off the year and what we're moving into. This is a universal 9 year, so it's very much about endings and beginnings. And endings and beginnings are kind of one and the same thing. And so while so much of the old is like crumbling and dissolving and shedding and leaving, there's also these new things happening. Now, this is also the year of the snake, and that's very Ophiuchus themed, right? Ophiuchus is represented as the archetype by the serpent, which would kind of be like the higher of the snake. And the kind of role of Ophiuchus, or of the snake in general, right, is about shedding. The snake sheds its skin and becomes kind of a new person. Also, I think it's interesting to note that, with the kind of themes of Ophiuchus happening and this universal 9 year, you can see how the themes of that are going to play out for the rest of the year. There is a huge shedding of the old. This is not only about old systems and old structures, this is individually and within ourselves, a deep, deep shedding of the old operating system. It's a deep shedding of the density and the heaviness, which I'm going to get into. That was a lot of the themes of January. And so with this, the snake moves in a very interesting way, right? The snake is not actually moving off of logic, off of even linear time, right? It's moving in this very unique way. And I think that really goes to the themes of the age of Aquarius, which the big theme this year is going to be embracing your uniqueness in the way that you move, in the way that you do things. And that's going to be different from everybody else. And that's very Aquarian. Like, Aquarius kind of looks at what everybody else is doing and, like, the way things are and traditionally how it's done. And they tend to do the opposite of that. And so this is going to be one of those years where we've talked about this with the light bodies we did last year. Like, everything leading up to this was the old ways will simply stop working. So your old patterns and behaviors, right? Your old conditionings, they just won't work anymore. And by not working, I mean that you will start to see that you're not getting the same outcome. You're not getting the same results. Things aren't falling into place, right? And that's a sign that we have to let go of those old ways. We have to discover new ways. So this year is a 9 year, as I said, and the 9 year is ruled by Mars. So even though this year is very feminine in nature, I'm going to get to that, we are in the rulership of Mars this year. So I would suggest that everybody looks at their Mars sign in your birth chart, and that will give you a lot of insight, both the house and the sign, as to how you move, and to really embrace your Mars energy this year, because this is your unique way of how you move energy, how you process energy, how you transmute, how you make decisions, how you exert your light out into the world. And that is going to be different for everybody. So this year is all about learning the way that you move and embracing that that might be very different from other people. It might be different from the traditional sense of what how people tell you you're supposed to do things. And this is all about how we're kind of breaking the rules of reality. The old ways aren't going to work anymore, right? And so what was happening in January specifically was I have been talking a lot about the crystalline core of the earth has been turned back on. I think I shared that in December. So the crystalline core has been turned back on, meaning Mother Earth reclaimed her crystalline core, just as we have been reclaiming our crystalline core, right, through the light body work and things. It's the core of who we are. It's the soul's emanation in the body. It is the divine operating system, right? That has been hijacked and covered up by so much programming and trauma and wounding and density that it was really hard to kind of, again, like find ourselves, like to really find the core of who we are. And so we were mirroring this process with Mother Earth because she had been hijacked, right? There's a lot of things to go into with that, but it's not really that important. So the crystalline core of the earth has been reclaimed and turned back on, meaning that Mother Earth is now emanating her natural energy, which is very high vibrational, right? We were intended always to be a fifth dimension and beyond planet. And so with that, a few things happened in November and December. One of which was that the timelines merged. I shared that already. There was many timelines running on very different consciousness levels. They merged into the oneness timeline, which means we're all on the same trajectory now. But what also happened with that, that was back in November, was that all the density and unconsciousness from the lower timelines got absorbed into the higher timelines, which meant that all of us who were existing on those kind of higher timelines had to absorb and process and transmute the energy of those lower timelines. In essence, we were doing this kind of like spiritual and energetic grunt work to help the whole. Okay, so that was the first round of that happening. Now, also on that same breath, the baseline of Mother Earth started to move up. Okay, so I have been posting about this for the last couple of weeks or last month or so. How Mother Earth had been sitting at 7.8 hertz, which is pretty close to a death frequency. And that was, of course, due to the hijacking, the density on the planet, lower technology, et cetera, et cetera. And now, when the crystal core got turned back on and it started emanating its true frequency, which is much higher, her baseline has now started to move up, and it's slowly moving up and will continue to move up. The date that the galactics have given me is the 7/7 portal. So July 7th, that is a huge, going to be a huge day. We will have Uranus moving into Gemini that day. This year, all of the outer planets change signs, which is virtually unheard of. This is like a once in a many lifetimes type of astrology year. And of course, they will dip back to the 29th degree of their previous signs for a little bit at the end of the year. But this year, we will get the first taste of this complete, paradigm shift when all the outer planets change signs. It's such new energy, it's such different energy that it requires a total overhaul, a total change in the collective, right? And so on 7/7, when Uranus moves into Gemini, that'll be the completion of all outer planets changing signs. Now, as I said, when we get into the fall and winter, those planets will briefly dip back into their previous signs, but this will be kind of the completion of this moment where all the outer planets are now in these new signs, and it's very, very new paradigm, very golden age, very event energy, and that's on the 7/7 that will complete the outer planet transitions. So the galactics have shared that leading up to that date in particular, Mother Earth's baseline is going to continue to move up. And so what they showed me was the baseline will move up to 200 by the 7-7, Mother Earth's baseline, right? Which is typically measured by the Schumann. And 200 is the bare minimum of where ego dies and higher frequencies start to come in. So the ego, density, lower frequencies, etc., can only exist under 200. And so if we can reach that by the 7-7, it essentially eradicates the third dimension. Okay, it essentially kind of wipes away the third dimensional state, which is low consciousness. And so Mother Earth's baseline has been slowly moving up. So about now, right, moving into February, her baseline has moved up to about 40 hertz. So she was at 7.8. It's moving up to she's at about 40 right now. And so the frequencies that have been getting pushed up out of the collective consciousness over the past few months have been the frequencies that lie beneath 40, which is shame. Shame is the lowest frequency in human nature, in the psyche. Guilt and apathy. So those three frequencies are heavily being literally pushed out and almost eradicated from the consciousness. So if you felt that the last month or so, this is part of that process, right? And so as the timelines have merged and as the baseline is moving up, these really dense, really heavy energies are being pushed up out of the collective consciousness, and we are feeling it because we are all connected. And so middle of January, right, January 11th, we had the North Node, which is our kind of North Star, right? And the North Node changes every every 18 months, every year and a half. And we go through a different 18-month cycle, right? So when the North Node and South Node shifts, we move into a new cycle where humanity is being guided by the North Node, and the South Node will inevitably bring up things that must be released, that must be resolved, healed, let go of, right? So the North Node moved into Pisces on January 11th. And so we right now have a massive stellium in Pisces, which will continue through February. We've got the North Node, we've got Saturn, we've got Neptune, we've got Venus in Pisces. It's a lot of Pisces. And so the thing about Pisces is that, Pisces is, it's the energy of the all, okay? So, so with Pisces, we don't really have a sense of self, right? Pisces means we are merged with everyone and everything. We are all in the soup of consciousness, if you will, right? And so Pisces, it's a struggle sometimes when there's a lot of planets in Pisces, because we just feel like there's no, and there really isn't any separation, right? But we feel like there is no separation between our energy and everybody else's. Our consciousness and the collective consciousness, right? Like we are connected to the planets, we're connected to creation, nature, each other. There's no escaping it. We're all in the soup. And Pisces like dissolves boundaries. It's like this idea that everything affects everything else. And so with all this Pisces energy, especially in January, the hard part has been has been that we are struggling to kind of what's the word? Like we're struggling to feel the difference between what the collective is experiencing and what we're experiencing. Now, I do feel that this is part of the divine plan, right? Because for the next month, until we get to like the end of March, so for the next like month and a half, we are all deeply connected. So the first waivers are right now going through the second round of this incredible, almost like hyper processing state. Like I said, the first round kind of happened at the end of November, early December. which was when the timelines merge, and all of a sudden we were like feeling all this heaviness and density and just intensity, whereas before we were kind of holding our vibration, you know, fairly high while the rest of the collective were at various other stages, and then it all merged together and we had to absorb it. So we're in the second round of that. I believe the third round is probably going to be somewhere around early March, I think, where we are hyper processing. So as the baseline is moving up and this deeply heavy energy, and Faith wrote some great posts about this as well. If you guys look in our channels, she got some great information about this process as well, where she kind of saw it as like there's the golden thread and there's the black thread, right? And the golden thread obviously is like higher consciousness and higher frequency, and the black thread is this really heavy density, and they've become intertwined and entangled, and we are disentangling these two and doing releasing and transmuting and processing, etc. And so that's why I've been talking a little bit about quantum entanglement, which is a, you know, quantum physics theory, which basically says that any two atoms that have ever come into contact with one another will forever affect each other. No matter how far apart you place those atoms, once they have come into contact, they will forever affect one another. A change that happens with one atom will create an instantaneous change within the other atom, right? And they could be light years apart, they could be billions of light years apart, and it won't matter. And that is the essence of Pisces. It is quantum entanglement. It's that we all affect each other, we all affect the greater whole, the consciousness creation. There is no separation. But because we are now kind of in this entanglement with the lower frequencies, we are having to take on the role of helping purge this. We're doing this in service to Mother Earth. She's trying to disentangle this density that has quite literally enslaved her and poisoned her and sickened her. And we're also doing it for ourselves, so the whole consciousness can raise up. But this is it is a delicate process, and has been an intense process. First waivers have been called to move up our personal baselines. Okay, so as Mother Earth's baseline continues to rise, we are being called to move up our baseline as well. So if you guys look at the vibrational scale of consciousness, you can kind of see what your average baseline is. Most first waivers are going to be falling anywhere between 400 and 500 as just your normal average frequency, right? What you're kind of holding steadily on a daily basis. And of course, we do dip down to do transformation, and then we come back up, right? Now, we are being called to get to the 500 baseline, which is unconditional love, and to have that be our average everyday baseline, right? And a lot of people think they're there, but you know, I mean, as essentially we have to do this with Mother Earth, but her capacity to rise at a faster rate is much different than ours, right? So we are kind of needing to go ahead because she's going to rise very, very fast. So we're doing this in order to help stabilize this entire process. So that's one of the focuses of the next few months, especially, is on your frequency. Again, this goes into the age of Aquarius. This goes into all of the Piscean planets that we have. It's about frequency, right? And that's why I said lean into your Mars energy as well, because your Mars is going to let you know how you process, how you transmute, how you move energy. The, you know, kind of the essence of this year is momentum. And because there's going to be these really sticky points where we hit plateaus, and also where we kind of get brought down in frequency, right, to do the processing and transmuting and transforming. And those periods are really tough to do such a big drop down and then to raise ourselves back up again. It's a tiring process. But the key word is momentum. So even in those low moments where we are brought down in frequency really heavily to do some deep processing and transmuting work, as long as we're just taking one step in front of the other, keeping the momentum, it doesn't have to be fast, it's not a race. We are continuing to move the energy forward. we will be able to pull ourselves back up. But these are some really dense frequencies that we're agreeing to help process, right? Shame, guilt, apathy. These are states of being that are incredibly low. And so a lot of people in January shared that they felt very lethargic. They felt exhausted, they felt apathetic, they felt angry, they felt depression. This is part of that work, right? And we've also had Mars retrograde in Cancer, which is really a tough transit because, again, Mars is our forward momentum. He's been retrograde and in the sign of Cancer, which is already a really tough area for him to be in. We just keep getting pulled back to emotional regulation. We keep getting pulled back to the heart center, to self-care, to nurturing, to, Cancer moves at a slower pace because they're doing a lot of it from the inside out. And that's what we've been really called deeply into. So January was rough, right? It was kind of a really rough process that we were in. We're starting to break through because, again, enough of us are doing this at the same time, that we are taking this on collectively and helping to move this ascension process this year in this accelerated, the divine plan's been accelerated. So the time frames we have, a lot shorter, a lot faster. They require more quantum leaps. They require more like letting go and surrender, right? That's the Piscean North Node. Now the South Node in Virgo is inevitably bringing up a lot of physical purging, because Virgo rules physical health and wellness and Pisces rules spiritual health and wellness. So it's going to look like a lot of sickness in the collective and possibly even in yourself, right? But we just have a different viewpoint on sickness. It is density release. It is transmuting. It is healing, essentially. It is purging. It is a necessary part of the process. But we will start seeing more of that going on in the collective because of the baseline moving up. Because of these deep releases happening, a lot of people are going to start having a lot of symptoms they may have not had before. And again, it's important that we look at the higher perspective and that we take the spiritual perspective, which is this is part of the healing process. This is part of the purging process. And taking care of your energetic wellness is what's going to get you through this. Now, as we move into the month of February, we are entering kind of a new energy. So firstly, now we're officially kind of in the new year vibe. And the month of February is a 2-month, right? So the 2 is about merging. So there's a lot of, ways that this could play out. But the 2 is about merging. It's about union, relationships. It's about unconditional love. So we're moving from this really tumultuous kind of energy, and then we're moving now into this really ethereal, very beautiful energy this month. And I think that this is a month where we have a lot of integration and a lot of coming really into ourselves, like really discovering who we actually are, which has been a long time coming, right? And we're going to find these new ways of relating to others and how we see others, right? Because it's been very divisive. It's been this whole perspective of blame and judgment and projection. And that's why human relationships are so hard. And that's why they often, don't sustain, is because honestly, the root of it is that we haven't had proper relationships with self, and we haven't been able to have unconditional love for self. And so that just gets translated into everyone else. And then this is why we have such lack of empathy, such lack of understanding, such lack of proper relating between human beings. We have conflict, disagreements, arguments, debates, judgment. Like I said, and this is what's going to heal this month. So this is going to be the theme of February. So the first thing about February, it's heavy on Pisces and Aquarius energy. So again, there's this idea of merging oneness, real deep connection and empathy and unconditional love and new ways of relating. And then we also have this Aquarius energy, right? And Aquarius is all about the new way, the new paradigm. It has less to do with self, right? And like self focus. Aquarius is really wanting to be authentic. They want to be who they are. They want to be authentic to themselves. They also like things that are very unique and different, outside of the box, like interesting, right? Like you don't have to do what everybody else is doing. You don't have to follow the crowd. You move how you move. Innovation, creativity, community. And so with those two energies, we're really anchoring in this kind of new paradigm energy that's happening this month. So, of course, because of polarities, we will find that as we're doing that this month, a lot more things in the external world will start to fall apart because more things are coming together, right? Community, relationships, unions, balance, harmony, which means inevitably other things that are not a match to those frequencies will fall apart. So there's like a splitting apart and a falling apart. And then at the other token, there's these beautiful coming togethers and harmonies and unions. And that's just going to be the name of the game this year. With every ending, there is a new beginning. It's one and the same, right? So with January, we literally felt like everything was ending. In many ways, I felt like all of a sudden so many things weren't working anymore. They just weren't working. And so it was like this total ending of like, well, this is how I've always done things and this is what worked for me. And this is, and then all of a sudden that's not happening anymore. And it felt like this huge shedding of like, well, you know, there's a new way now and these old patterns aren't going to work anymore. And maybe old ideas and dreams all of a sudden aren't the same anymore. And so it was this whole kind of collapsing internally and externally that happened in January, I think ultimately to prepare for this two energy. So I do really love the energy of February. Like I said, I think the main theme of this month is going to be unconditional love for self, which is essential. It is the merging of the higher self and the human self. And so basically, as the higher selves are merging into our vessels fully, into our light bodies, right? Everything that is not a match to that, everything that's not real, that's not true to who we actually are, has to leave, right? There's also going to be this interesting phenomenon, like I said, with this theme of relationships and how we relate to others. And all of a sudden, everything's merged and melded together. So a lot of old issues that tended to happen in human relationships, like I said, projections, blames, judgments, all these things will start to dissolve because we will start to see more and more that the people that we judged are simply another version of ourselves. The people that triggered us so deeply was because we, in fact, were carrying the frequency that they were showing us externally that we couldn't see within ourselves. So we had to see it externally. The blame and the projection is going to start changing to where we realize again that nothing is personal. That, I think that's a big theme this month, is like nothing is personal. Everything has always just been energy. And so a lot of the walls are going to start to drop, right? The walls and the barriers that we've had between self and others are going to start to dissolve and come down. We're going to have to learn vulnerability, openness, right? And our perspectives are going to change through this. This is truly, I think I'm also witnessing the balance between masculine and feminine really starting to come in, because again, as I talk about merging, right? Part of this is the pole shift, right? We've seen how physically the poles are shifting. I mean, that's well documented. The weather's erratic, right? Things are very much changing in our reality, and that is partly due to the poles shifting. Now, the physical poles shifting are simply a manifestation of the energetic poles shifting on the planet, which is that internally we are shifting from being masculine dominant, right? Patriarchal, hyper masculine, and we are coming more into balance where it's going to be feminine led, meaning your internal feminine energy is leading for all vessels. Mother Earth herself is a feminine vessel. This is a feminine energy system that we live in, but we've been living inverted in a hyper masculine system, which doesn't match the planet that we live on. So we're moving more into the heart center, more into feminine led paradigm systems, which means that all masculine and feminine are coming now into their internal balanced harmonics, which have been inverted, right? And so that's part of the pole shifting. But this is now part of balance, right? So as everyone is coming more into balance, we're also moving more into the right brain than left brain dominant. So this is happening. This is dissolving a lot of the, again, barriers to true intimacy, which is vulnerability. Simple. True divine unions, true unconditional love. This is a big month where all of these themes are going to be kind of playing out. Now, so we're going to be talking a lot about this, all of these things happening this month. It's a very, what I call an alchemical process. It's a very alchemical process where the art of this is to surrender. The North Node in Pisces and all the Piscean energy is leading us that way. It's to surrender to this process that is happening without resistance. Because the more we resist the process, the more painful, the more suffering. And so being an observer and really learning the art of surrender, and also I think really being open to a change in perspective has, is going to be important this month, where again, a lot of the things that we always thought were true, like just look at what's happening with disclosure. A lot of the things we always thought were true might not be the truth. That was our perception. And on a global consciousness level, our individual perceptions create our reality. But our individual perceptions are often clouded by projections, by interference, by programming, by wounding, by all of these things. And that is what is all getting dissolved. So ultimately, the collective consciousness as a whole comes into the one perspective. The one perspective is called true reality. It's just truth. It's what it is, not what we think it is, not what, our opinions are. It's this one universal kind of truth. And I think when we look at the frequencies between 400 and 500, which is what we're anchoring into right now, right? The first wavers, those are the themes you're going to see play out, right? Of these traits, these divine traits that are coming into embodiment. So, you have neutrality as one of those, right? Neutrality is a really important part of the process. You have acceptance, where you are just accepting of what is without resisting it. You have the frequency of understanding, right? Understanding, right? That everybody else is in the same process, that there's divine timing and there's the divine plan, and you have this understanding that everything is always happening for the highest good, even if you don't like the way it looks, right? And then you get to level 450, which is right under 500 of unconditional love, which is discernment. Discernment is the gateway to unconditional love. Because without discernment, you will, because what a lot of people think is unconditional love is actually things like enabling. It's actually victim consciousness. Or it can actually be, it can even be, arrogance, or it can be things that people think unconditional love is, but it's actually not. And that's why discernment lies right under unconditional love at 450. If you don't have discernment, and again, the new paradigm is all about frequency. And so to train yourself to being able to detect and feel and sense and discern frequency, which is very different from just being able to, you know, people are like, you know, of course, it's an important part of, again, human relating and to understand things like body language, you know, intuition, kind of understanding people's tones. And, you know, just we call it reading the room. Like, reading the room is a very basic, like, social skill, right? But a lot of people don't have it. But I would say reading the room is just like a basic social skill. But above that is actually being able to discern frequency, which does take training and it does take internal work to get to that point, because you're not going off the words people say. It's not about the words that they're saying, it's not about what they look like, it's not even about their tone, really. I mean, it sometimes can be, but it's it's hard to explain, right? It's a frequency. It's a combination of many things. And so if we cannot detect and discern frequency, then we will fall into those traps of things like judgment and blame or enabling, right? Giving our energy away to the wrong people, places, and things. And we think we're giving love, but we're not discerning properly that this is, you know, when you give, right? When you give your energy, your time, your love to people, places, and things that are of a lower frequency, you're actually, that's not unconditional love. That's enabling, right? So we have to know all these things so that we can properly embody that. So this is the month where we're going to be focusing on that, teaching about frequency, and just really getting everyone to that place of discernment, right? So this month we have a few events. So the first one is going to be this weekend, on the 2-2 portal. And this is going to be the February astrology gathering. So I started these last month, because this year, like I said, it has such like rare and just like once in a lifetime kind of astrology transits, which are really exciting. And so basically every month we have like really big things happening. And so I'm going to be doing an astrology gathering, you know, little class, the first week of every month for the rest of this year, to discuss the transits of that month. So everybody can kind of, you know, look at their own chart. You can kind of just see where the focus might be and how to align yourself best with the transits that are upcoming. So this will be on Sunday, the 2-2 portal. The main events that we'll be focusing on and talking about for February are Venus entering Aries. This is a big one, because Venus will also be going retrograde in March. So we just had Mars retrograde for like 3 months, and now we're just going to have Venus retrograde. So, you know, the Mars and Venus retrogrades are always really interesting because they don't happen that often, every couple of years. And Mars being more of the masculine momentum energy, and Venus being our love language and how we love ourselves and how we express ourselves and our creativity. Both of those going retrograde kind of back to back. There's a lot to kind of unpack there. So we're going to talk about Venus entering Aries this month, and then she will go retrograde next month. We're going to talk about two big planets going direct. So we've been in heavy retrograde energy for the last like 4 months. It was like honestly actually painful. We finally had Uranus go direct, on the 30th of January, so the day after the new moon, in Aquarius, and Uranus rules Aquarius. So it was good to finally have someone go direct. So Uranus started that movement forward about innovation, insights, revelations, just starting to kind of get things moving. And then we're going to have Jupiter and Mars both go direct in February. So I'm very excited for that. We're also going to have Neptune conjuncting the North Node, which is really interesting because, of course, Neptune and the North Node are going to be conjunct in Pisces, in the critical degrees of Pisces. So it's very, very ethereal, very kind of magical, but also wonky energy. So we're going to talk about that specific date, and also, of course, the Pisces and Aquarius themes of the month. So if you guys want to sign up for that, all the events are on the website if you want RSVP. Now, I do also want to say that I did share this week, I had taken a break from doing personal astrology sessions. I have other projects and other roles that I have gone into, and so I just needed a break. And also just to integrate myself with the energies as well, and just really figure out like how I wanted to move forward with the sessions. And so I have opened my astrology sessions back up for February. So if you, I know a lot of people have emailed me and asked me when the sessions would be back up. They are back up now. So I have 2 sessions available right now. One is the custom astrology session, which basically it's a customized session for what all the focus points that you want to do. That can be locational astrology, healing, medical astrology. That can be specific points of your chart, right? It can really be anything that you really want to focus on, and we'll do the deep dive in the custom. I also have 2025 transit chart readings, and those are the only 2 I'm offering right now. I've done so many readings of just kind of explaining the basic blueprints of the chart, and I just felt like I wanted to really move on and really focus this year on the transits happening this year because they're so monumental. So with the 2025 transit chart, I will, of course, explain and dive deeply into how these major transits this year are going to affect your chart. And of course, based on your placements, how you can best work with the energy, and also where you can anticipate kind of these big changes to happen in your life this year. So if you're trying to move in a new direction, or you're really feeling you're kind of coming into something new, a new expression of yourself, a new avenue, new projects, goals, things like that, then that's a great reading for you as well. Now, the other 2 classes that we will have this month, of course, is we will have our master classes as we do every month. So every month we kind of pick the focus points that the galactics are guiding us to focus on for the month in those master classes. So the master class is a 2-part. It'll be on the 15th and 16th of February. And we are going to focus on our baseline frequencies, and we're going to talk about discernment in that class. So we're going to talk about basically a deep dive in training on how to discern frequencies, which is a skill. And it does take time to kind of learn how to feel and see and pick out those frequencies so that you can navigate. Again, this is the year of the snake. So as much as there's some really beautiful things to, I think, blossom from this year of the snake, we would be silly to not really also look at the fact that the snake energies in the lower is going to bring up a lot of shadow energies, like I said, in the collective. And there is going to kind of be this wonky energy where, just like a snake, right? Sometimes it's hard to see. Sometimes it's a little bit slithery. It's a little bit slippery. And so there is going to be a lot of wonky energy where sometimes there's going to be a lot of moments where it's hard to read the energy. It's hard to know exactly what's going on. And of course, we're never going to be able to figure it all out. But having a high level of discernment and being able to sense frequency will save you a lot of time and trouble when there's going to be a lot of people in the collective as these frequencies get pushed up. The ego wants to hang on to them. And one of the ego, and especially super ego, which we'll be talking about this month, one of the super ego traits is that it can morph and it can mimic. So there's going to be a lot of people, a lot of vessels who, again, it's not them, it's not personal, but their egos are hanging on for dear life. The ego is hanging on for dear life, even though it is going through this alchemical death. But in order to survive, right, the ego is based on survival, which is why we have that programming, is it will morph. It will change its expression so it can go undetected, especially superego. It will mimic. It can almost mimic divinity, but eventually the facade kind of comes down, but it can mimic it for a while. So to navigate this year in the highest way possible, we've got to be spot on with being able to see and pick out and call out frequencies and not get kind of hoodwinked in the in the soup of it all. So we're going to be talking about that in the masterclass, and I will also be including some astrology in this class, because one thing I'm going to discuss is your rising or ascendant sign, because that has a lot to do with your auric field, which is one way you discern and interpret. Your auric field, right, is like this bubble of energy. So every person, place, and thing that you interact with in the world, that data or that impression passes through the auric field. And then your auric field kind of downloads that, and then you go through the whole process of interpretation, right? You're interpreting what you're experiencing. So your auric field, which is dictated by your rising, aka the ascendant sign, is going to have a lot to do with your style of discernment, and also your style of relating to others. And so I think we're going to really focus that class. It's going to be really in depth, this particular class, because we're not only talking about learning discernment and getting trained on frequencies, but we're also talking about how you're relating to others, and specifically how your relationships with people, places, and things are bringing awareness to you, right? They're bringing you deeper levels of awareness that you can't necessarily see in yourself, and that's going to vary depending on the blueprint of your auric field. So I will talk about that in that class as well. So that'll be kind of a really in-depth discernment relationship kind of class. And then we will have our quantum light body seminar on the 222 portal. So we started last month with, we had completed in 2024, we completed the activations, we completed the stabilizations of the light bodies, and now we're moving into basically the utilization and kind of discovery, getting more in depth with how our light bodies are working and how to utilize them. So last month in January, we went through the initial 6 light body blueprints that have emerged. As we've said, I'm sure there's going to be more, but there was a basic 6 light body blueprints that we all have kind of a core blueprint and then a secondary blueprint. So we went through all of those. Those included the quartz body, the amber body, the citrine body, the emerald body, the amethyst body, and the sapphire body. And so we all kind of had like a core blueprint and then like a secondary one. And so this month, what we're going to be talking about is how each of these blueprints does their processing and their transmuting, because we're in the hyper processing state right now. And so this is, I think, helpful because, again, we all process and transmute energy in different ways. So if we know our way of processing, this is just going to help. This is going to help us move through these energies at a much quicker rate. Now, also, each blueprint has a unique contribution in the way that it activates the whole. Remember, during this next 2-month window where we have heavy Pisces energy, yes, we're going to be feeling all things. We're so immersed right now in the all energy. So the hard part is the extra transmuting of that, but the higher part is we also have a greater effect on the whole in this window of time. And so our light body blueprints also give us kind of, insight into not only how we process and transmute best, but how we then affect the whole best, right? And so basically the parts that we're going to talk about is how each blueprint does their processing and transmuting, and then secondly, how you most affect the collective. And so we're going to touch on something that I think will be really interesting for everybody. If you're familiar with Richard Rudd and his work with the gene keys, it's amazing. We always highly recommend anyone to get Richard Rudd's book, The Gene Keys, to dive into his work, because it really is really insightful. And so a lot of people have asked more information on how to understand their gene key profile and how to dive into the gene keys. So one thing we're going to cover with the light body is called the Pearl sequence. And this you can look up for free on the Gene Key profile website. But your pearl sequence is ultimately going to give you a lot of insight as well as to how you affect the collective consciousness. It's your piece of the puzzle that you give to the collective, and that's going to be a little bit unique for everybody. So we're going to touch a little bit on that in the seminar as well. So yeah, got a big month coming up. And then of course, as we get into like March, April, May, it's just going to be a lot of activity. Again, all these planets are slowly coming out of retrogrades, and starting in March is when we have the big outer planets beginning to change signs. Okay, so we already had the North Node shift. In March, at the very end of March, we will start eclipse season, which will be very interesting. And then we will have Neptune move into Aries. And then we have things happening in April as well. Then we will have Saturn move into Aries. And then we will have Jupiter move into Cancer in June. And then in July, we will have the big shebang of Uranus moving into Gemini, and all of a sudden everything has changed. The whole paradigm, the whole energy has shifted. So every month is kind of like this quantum leap or this portal that we're having to move through, leading up to just a really profound, exciting year, which always happens with a nine year. So we appreciate everybody who's been joining us in doing this work. So of course, if you guys do want to join us in any of these seminars, feel free to sign up on the website. And I will see you later in the month for some updates moving into March and eclipse season. Love you guys.